Hi guys, I hope you are doing great. Well, since I'm making a video about INFJs and philosophy, I thought it would be adequate for me to wear my much prized Wittgenstein t-shirt. Anyway, this is neither here nor there. I sometimes hear a complaint about, not so much about INFJ philosophers, but maybe more so about the typing of certain philosophers as INFJ. Some people complain that there seems to be a discrepancy between the way that INFJs are often described, including by myself, as being kind of rambly when they express themselves. You know, they like to go at length about things. They can be quite fluent. They can sometimes wax lyrical, sometimes not, but a tendency, they take their time, right? They take their time and they unfurl a lot of words and a lot of sentences that cohere together, but some people can perceive to be frustratingly rambly, including in the case of my own videos. You know, sometimes I get the odd person saying like, "Oh, Ren, like I watched 5 minutes, the first 5 minutes of your video, and you didn't talk about anything. You didn't share any real content. I'm never coming back. I'm leaving with a bang, and I'm never coming back." And that seems to contrast with the view of certain INFJ philosophers as being not at all like this, including our friend Wittgenstein here, okay? There are some INFJ philosophers who are famous for saying that they had difficulty expressing themselves, right? That they had a difficulty of expression. So on the one hand, you seem to have a particular kind of INFJ, so perhaps that would be the Plato type of INFJ that like wrote a lot of books and produced a huge amount of writing. And then you have perhaps more like the Wittgenstein type INFJ that seem to produce a much smaller amount of writing. You could also use the fragments of Heraclitus, although he was much more likely an INTJ, but again, that has a lot to do with an I. Published in aphorisms, a preference for aphorisms above and beyond, or rather than long narratives. But again, Wittgenstein is, I think, the quintessence of this, because he did say that he had an unbelievable difficulty of expression that he often felt to be disabling. And, you know, on the other hand, again, you have the Plato type, you have the why am I not remembering his name? Well, you have the Kierkegaard type, because I personally believe that Kierkegaard is an INFJ, and you have the Schopenhauer type. You know, Schopenhauer, that's the one I was trying to remember the name of. The World as Will and Representation is like more than 1,000 pages long. So yeah, he took his time and he loaded a lot of content into that book. So how can you bring the two strands together? How can you link them? Is it possible to link them? Or are we faced with the necessity of admitting that maybe not all these guys are in fact INFJs? Now, I would argue that they are in fact all INFJs, and that what links them is a quintessential INFJ experience. And the quintessential INFJ experience is the struggle with expressing the particular truths that they see. Because the truths that they see are revealed usually in fragmentary NI insights. It's very much in the nature of NI to not reveal the whole mechanism at once. So you get the feeling that you know, you get in your bones, sometimes you do know, but you cannot quite retrace the whole journey that led you to go there. And in addition to that, there is another quintessential NI/INFJ experience, is that you're in touch with certain archetypal meanings that don't have a direct translation into the language of external reality, particularly the language of physics, the language of materialism. So people sometimes are comfortable calling that spiritual. I think it's something slightly distinct, but you know, I do embrace the term spiritual in my latest book on the INFJ, The Infinite Soul. I talk about a spiritualized INFJ as an INFJ who's able to articulate themselves in this language. INFJ life in the modern world, and how to lead a purposeful, meaningful and rich life in a world often felt to be hostile to INFJs. So get the book if you haven't yet, the link is below, as well as its prequel, The Ecstatic Soul. Best-selling book. The link is still available. The book is still available. Lots of good reviews. Check it out. Leave more reviews for this book if you can. This is about the content of INFJ consciousness. But anyway, maybe you are already familiar with this book. In any case, the difficulty of expression that Wittgenstein is referring to is only revealing of his peculiar sensitivity to the difficulty that the INFJ experiences when it comes to articulating an NI insight into the language of the transparent language of, usually as it is, Western reason. Because you probably will notice that NI dominant philosophers who are not from the Western tradition don't usually complain about this issue. And it's because in the Western world, in the history of the Western world and of Western reason and Western enlightenment, there is very much, this premium that is put on transparency of thought being translated directly into transparency of words on paper, transparency of language. And the thought of INFJ is the complex nature of NI insight, so that these thoughts are not easily translatable in language. So when you're comparing a Wittgenstein and someone like Plato or an INFJ who seems to ramble, consider they're kind of doing the same thing. One is rambling because they're struggling to quite arrive at the destination that they want to arrive at because it's so difficult to find the right articulation. Or you're like Plato when you use drama, you use theater, you use allegory, you use symbolic language in order to arrive at these truths in a way, if you like, that obviates the need, right, to resort to the transparent language of Western reason. Perhaps helps that Plato and others of his kind were kind of prior to the, to the dominance of Enlightenment thought. Wittgenstein is kind of saying the same thing, except that he finds this difficulty paralyzing. Perhaps it's also the fact that Wittgenstein is not able to write in the way that Plato writes. He's not able necessarily to write in the way that Schopenhauer writes. His particular style is more condensed and is more aphoristic because that's what suits him better. And he's not good at waffling. It could also have to do with the fact that Wittgenstein was likely on the spectrum, okay? So you have to take these into consideration. But everywhere, the core idea at the basis of the style is the same. There's a difficulty with expressing yourself in direct language, the language of external reality. So either you resort to kind of obscure aphorisms like Wittgenstein and you struggle a lot to kind of bring them forth, or you produce allegorical works or long works that kind of circle around a problem until you can actually find the correct articulation. But the difficulty with expressing yourself in the language of external reality is felt in both cases. So if you like this video, please drop me a like, and don't forget that I have a Patreon page where you can support my channel to keep it going. I'd be very grateful if you consider supporting me. There's also a link to my PayPal if you'd like to make a one-off donation. I rely on your donations, so like I said, it would be greatly appreciated. And don't forget, on Patreon, you can interact with me, you can contribute to the community, you can make suggestions, and I'm always hungry for new suggestions for videos. And we are doing Jungian readings at the moment, so if you're interested in joining the adventure, the link is below. Okay guys, I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.